No one talks about the phase where you don't fit anymore, but you also don't belong anywhere new yet. Where you outgrow people without hating them. Where you leave spaces without slamming doors. Where you feel stronger, but lonelier at the same time. This phase has a name. It is the moment Allah begins to teach the world how to handle you differently. And if you are in this moment right now, don't move, because what is happening to you is not loss. It is becoming. And the first thing Allah changes when you begin to become is not your life. It is what you notice. You begin to hear what sits behind words, not just the words themselves. You begin to feel what sits behind actions, not just the actions themselves. You start to sense when something is offered from sincerity, and when it is offered from convenience. You begin to feel the difference between being welcomed and being tolerated. And once this awareness enters your heart, you cannot live the same way again, because what you notice slowly becomes what you choose. And what you choose quietly becomes who you are. Allah first changes what you notice. Before Allah changes your life, He changes your awareness. This is how it always begins, not with a loud sign, not with a dramatic moment, but with a quiet shift inside your chest, where things that once passed unnoticed now begin to pause you. You start to feel a difference in the way people speak to you, not just in what they say. You begin to hear what is behind the words, not only the words themselves. There was a time when you listened only to sentences. Now you listen to sincerity. You notice when someone says, "I care," but their actions walk in the opposite direction. You notice when someone smiles, but their presence feels heavy. You notice when a conversation is full of words but empty of intention, and you also notice the opposite. You feel when someone sits with you in silence and somehow gives you more comfort than 1,000 explanations ever could. This is not overthinking. This is awareness being trained. Allah begins by teaching your heart to recognize the difference between being welcomed and being tolerated. There is a warmth that comes when you are truly wanted in a space, and there is a coldness that comes when you are simply allowed to exist in it. Before, you may have accepted both as the same. Now, your heart can tell the difference. You start to sense energy, not in a mysterious way, but in a very human one. You feel when someone listens to understand, and when someone listens only to reply. You feel when a moment is shared, and when it is merely filled. You feel when a door is open, and when it is only unlocked halfway. And slowly, something changes. You stop rushing to fill silence. You stop forcing connection. You stop offering explanations where there is no real interest in understanding. You begin to sit back and observe. You let people reveal who they are, not through what they promise, but through what they consistently do. This is where value begins to grow. Because what you cannot notice, you will always accept. If you cannot notice small disrespect, you will live inside big disrespect. If you cannot notice half effort, you will build a life around being given half of what you deserve. If you cannot notice when your presence is being taken lightly, you will keep placing it in careless hands. So Allah sharpens your perception. He teaches your heart to read between moments, not just within them. You start to notice what happens after the conversation ends, not just during it. You notice who remembers you when they need nothing, not just when they need something. You notice who shows up in your quiet, not only in your noise. And this noticing is not meant to make you suspicious. It is meant to make you selective. You begin to understand that clarity is a form of mercy. That seeing clearly saves you from staying too long in places that slowly drain you. That awareness protects you from building emotional homes in spaces that were never meant to shelter you. Once this shift happens, you cannot go back. You cannot unsee what you now see. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot pretend that everything feels the same when it no longer does. And this is where the real change starts. Not in your job, not in your relationships, not in your circumstances, but in your heart. Because when Allah changes what you notice, He changes what you choose. And when He changes what you choose, He slowly, gently, and powerfully changes the entire direction of your life. Allah then changes what you tolerate. After Allah teaches you what to notice, He teaches you what to no longer carry. This is where the shift becomes heavier, not because life becomes harder, but because your heart becomes more honest with itself. There was a time when you tolerated things simply because you were used to them, being interrupted, being overlooked, being the one who always adjusted, always understood, always stayed quiet so the moment would not become uncomfortable. You told yourself it was patience. You told yourself it was kindness. You told yourself it was humility. And sometimes it was. But now, Allah begins to draw a quiet line inside you. You start to feel a weight when something is off, a small discomfort when someone speaks to you without care, a heaviness when your effort is met with indifference, a tiredness when you are expected to give without ever being considered. This is not your heart becoming fragile. This is your heart becoming calibrated. Allah is teaching you that patience is not the same as self-erasure. That humility is not the same as making yourself small so others can feel large. That forgiveness does not mean allowing harm to become a habit in your life. So your tolerance changes. You no longer laugh at things that quietly disrespect you. You no longer stay in conversations that drain you. You no longer say yes just to keep peace when peace costs you your inner stability. And this part can feel confusing, because people around you may not notice the inner work Allah is doing. They only notice the result. They may say you have changed. They may say you are distant. They may say you are not as easy as you used to be. What they do not see is that you are no longer as willing to abandon yourself. Allah begins to teach you that your heart is not a storage place for everyone else's carelessness, that your time is not a container for endless demands, that your presence is not something to be consumed without awareness. So you begin to step back from things that feel misaligned, not dramatically, not loudly, but steadily. You start choosing rest over obligation, peace over performance, alignment over approval. And this can feel lonely, because when you stop tolerating what is light, what is shallow, what is careless, there will be fewer places that feel comfortable, fewer people who feel familiar, fewer moments that feel easy, but what remains feels real. Allah is not taking things away to leave you empty. He is removing what does not honor what He is building inside you. This is where your life begins to narrow, but also deepen. You start to understand that not everything you can survive is something you are meant to stay inside. That strength is not measured by how much you can endure, but by how wisely you choose what deserves your endurance. And slowly, your heart becomes a place that is harder to enter. Not because you are closed, but because what is inside you is becoming precious. You are learning that tolerance is a gate, and Allah is teaching you how to guard it. Because what you allow to remain around you will eventually shape what remains within you. Allah then changes how you respond. After Allah teaches you what to notice and what to no longer tolerate, He begins a deeper work. He changes how your heart moves when it is touched. There was a time when everything reached you quickly, words landed fast, opinions settled deep, reactions rose instantly. If someone misunderstood you, you rushed to explain. If someone judged you, you hurried to correct them. If something went wrong, you felt an urgency to fix, to defend, to make things right in the moment. Your heart lived on the surface, not because you were shallow, but because you were open. And now, Allah begins to teach your heart how to have depth. You start to feel a pause inside you before you speak, a space between what happens and how you answer it, a quiet moment where your heart no longer jumps forward but steps back. This is not hesitation from fear. This is restraint from strength. Allah begins to teach you that not every word deserves your voice. Not every moment deserves your energy. Not every situation deserves your emotional investment. You start to realize that some questions are not asked to understand, but to challenge. Some comments are not spoken to connect, but to provoke. Some moments are not offered to build, but to test. So you respond differently. You stop rushing into explanations. You stop correcting every misunderstanding. You stop carrying the weight of other people's perceptions on your shoulders. And this can feel uncomfortable at first, because silence feels like surrender, stillness feels like loss, not responding feels like letting something go unresolved. But then you begin to notice something else. Your peace remains intact. You begin to understand that there is a kind of power in not giving everything a reaction, that some situations lose their weight when they do not receive your attention, that some conflicts dissolve when they are not fed by your emotion. Allah is teaching you how to protect your inner space. You start choosing when to speak instead of feeling compelled to speak. You start choosing when to engage instead of feeling obligated to engage. You start choosing when to step back instead of feeling guilty for not stepping forward. And in this choosing, your responses become intentional instead of instinctive. You speak less, but when you speak, your words carry more weight. You react slower, but when you act, your actions carry more clarity. You move quieter, but your presence feels steadier. People begin to feel this change before they understand it. They may notice that you no longer get pulled into every discussion, that you no longer chase every explanation, that you no longer absorb every emotional wave that passes near you. And some will be unsettled by this, because when someone cannot reach your reactions easily, they begin to realize they cannot control your inner state. But this is not coldness. This is composure. Allah is teaching you how to hold your heart in your own hands instead of placing it in the hands of every moment, every person, every opinion. You begin to understand that responding is a form of giving, and not everything deserves what you give. So you give selectively. You give kindness where there is sincerity. You give effort where there is respect. You give explanation where there is genuine curiosity. And you give silence where there is noise disguised as interest. This is where your responses become a form of worship, because you are no longer reacting from ego, from urgency, or from the need to be seen. You are responding from intention, from alignment, from a quiet awareness that Allah is watching your heart even when the world is not. And slowly you begin to feel something settle inside you, a steadiness, a sense that you are no longer being moved by everything that touches you, that you are no longer being shaped by every passing moment. Instead, you are being guided. And this is when you realize that Allah has not only changed what you notice and what you tolerate, He has changed who you are becoming when you respond. Allah then changes where you feel you belong. After Allah changes what you notice, what you tolerate, and how you respond, He touches something even deeper. He begins to change where your heart feels at home. There was a time when belonging meant being included, being invited, being part of the circle, being known by name in a room full of people. You felt safe where you were recognized, where your presence was familiar, where your role was understood. But now, something inside you has shifted. You can stand in the same spaces, among the same people, and still feel like you are no longer standing in the same place inside yourself. The conversations move, but your heart does not move with them. The laughter rises, but it does not reach you in the same way. The goals being discussed feel loud, but somehow small. This is not you becoming distant from people. This is you being drawn closer to purpose. Allah begins to lift your sense of belonging from places to meaning, from groups to alignment, from familiarity to direction. You start to feel uncomfortable staying where you are not growing. You begin to sense when a space is only feeding your time, but not your soul. You realize that being accepted is not the same as being elevated. And this realization can feel lonely, because when Allah shifts where you belong, He often does it before He shows you where you are going. You find yourself standing between what you have outgrown and what you have not yet reached. This is a narrow place. You no longer fully fit into your old life, but your new life has not yet revealed itself. You feel like a guest in rooms that once felt like home. You feel like a stranger to versions of yourself you used to recognize. And in this space, Allah does something quiet and powerful. He teaches you how to belong to Him first. You begin to find comfort in prayer when the world feels unfamiliar. You begin to find grounding in remembrance when conversations feel empty. You begin to find clarity in solitude when noise feels confusing. This is not withdrawal. This is reorientation. Allah is not removing you from people. He is repositioning you within your own heart. He is teaching you that your true belonging is not in being understood by the world, but in being known by your Lord. You start to realize that some spaces were only meant to hold you for a season, not for a lifetime. Some relationships were meant to shape you, not stay with you. Some paths were meant to introduce you to yourself, not become your final destination. And when you accept this, something softens inside you. You stop forcing yourself to fit where you no longer align. You stop shrinking your questions, your values, your depth, just to remain comfortable. You stop staying in places that require you to leave parts of your heart at the door. You begin to choose spaces that may be quieter, smaller, and less visible, but more truthful. Allah begins to surround you, not necessarily with more people, but with more meaning. Your sense of belonging becomes less about how many faces know you, and more about how deeply you recognize yourself in what you are doing, in how you are living, in who you are becoming. And this changes everything. You walk into places differently. You sit in conversations differently. You hold relationships differently. Because now, you are not searching for somewhere to be accepted. You are searching for somewhere to be aligned. And when you find that alignment, even in a small, simple, unseen corner of life, it feels more like home than any crowded room ever did. This is how Allah changes where you belong. Not by moving your feet first, but by moving your heart. Allah then changes who you rely on. After Allah changes what you notice, what you tolerate, how you respond, and where you feel you belong, He touches the deepest root of your heart. He changes where you place your sense of safety. There was a time when certain people felt like your anchor, a voice that calmed you, a presence that made things feel steady, a message that made the world feel lighter. You leaned on these connections, not just for companionship, but for reassurance, for grounding, for the feeling that you were not alone in what you were carrying. And there is nothing wrong with finding comfort in people. But Allah knows something about the human heart that we often forget. People can care deeply and still be inconsistent. People can mean well and still fall short. People can promise to stay and still be pulled away by their own struggles, their own changes, their own limits. So Allah begins to teach your heart a quieter form of security. You start to notice that even in the presence of others, there are moments when you still feel alone. Even in conversation, there are parts of your heart that remain untouched. Even in support, there are questions that no one can answer for you. And instead of letting this make you bitter, Allah uses it to make you aware. He shows you that your heart was never designed to rest fully in something created. It was designed to rest in the one who created it. This is where the shift begins. You start turning to prayer, not just as a habit, but as a place where you can arrive exactly as you are, without explanation, without performance, without being misunderstood. You start finding a strange calm in speaking to Allah about things you no longer feel the need to explain to people. You begin to sit with your worries in dua instead of in endless conversation. You begin to release your fears in remembrance instead of in reassurance seeking. You begin to place your hopes in tawakkul instead of in someone else's promise. This does not make you distant from people. It makes you anchored beyond them. You still care, you still connect, you still love. But you no longer collapse when someone disappoints you. You no longer feel undone when someone leaves. You no longer feel lost when someone changes. Because your center has moved. Your heart is no longer leaning on something that can shift. It is leaning on something that does not. And this changes how you walk through life. You become calmer in uncertainty, softer in loss, steadier in delay. You stop panicking when things do not work out the way you expected, because you trust the one who is writing the outcome. You begin to understand that people are part of your journey, but they are not the foundation of it. Allah is. And once this realization settles into your chest, something powerful happens. You stop asking, "Who will be there for me?" You start asking, "How can I stay close to the one who never leaves me?" This does not make you less human. It makes you more grounded. You still appreciate support. You still value companionship. You still cherish kindness. But you no longer build your sense of worth, safety, or direction on something that can be taken away. You build it on something that cannot. This is where your heart becomes harder to shake, not because it becomes closed, but because it becomes rooted. Rooted in trust instead of expectation. Rooted in faith instead of dependency. Rooted in Allah instead of uncertainty. And this is when you realize that what Allah has given you is not just strength. It is stability. A kind of stability that allows you to walk through change without losing yourself. To walk through loss without losing hope. To walk through the world without needing it to hold you up. Because now you are being held by something far greater. Allah then changes how you see yourself. After Allah teaches you where to place your trust, He turns your gaze inward, not toward pride, not toward self-admiration, but toward truth. There was a time when you discovered who you were through reflection in others, through praise that lifted you, through criticism that wounded you, through attention that made you feel visible, through distance that made you feel forgotten. Without realizing it, your sense of self lived in other people's reactions. If they approved, you felt steady. If they doubted, you felt shaken. If they noticed, you felt worthy. If they ignored, you felt small. And Allah, in His mercy, begins to loosen this grip. You start to notice how fragile it feels to carry your worth in someone else's hands. How exhausting it is to adjust yourself to every opinion, every mood, every expectation that comes your way. How heavy it is to keep asking the world, "Who am I today?" So Allah gently introduces you to a quieter mirror. Not the mirror of people, the mirror of intention. You begin to measure your days differently, not by how much you were praised, but by how sincerely you acted. Not by how much you were seen, but by how honestly you showed up. Not by how many agreed with you, but by whether your choices were aligned with what you know is right. This is a subtle change, but it reshapes everything. You start asking yourself questions that no one else can answer for you. Was I truthful even when it was inconvenient? Was I kind even when I was not rewarded? Was I patient even when no one noticed my waiting? And in these questions, you begin to meet a version of yourself that does not depend on an audience. You realize that there is a self you perform for the world, and there is a self you carry before Allah. One lives on the surface, the other lives in the depths. Allah draws you toward the deeper one. You begin to care less about how your actions look, and more about what they are rooted in. You begin to notice the difference between doing something to be seen and doing something to be sincere, between speaking to be heard and speaking to be true. And this changes the way you move through life. You stop bending your character to fit into rooms. You stop reshaping your values to stay comfortable in conversations. You stop softening your convictions just to remain accepted. Not because you want to stand out, but because you no longer want to stand divided inside yourself. Allah teaches you the quiet strength of being whole, of letting your outer life match your inner one, of letting your public self and your private self recognize each other. This is not an easy lesson, because when you stop living for approval, some people will stop understanding you. When you stop performing, some people will stop applauding. When you stop explaining yourself, some people will fill the silence with their own versions of who you are. And you learn to let them, not in bitterness, in peace. You learn that your identity is not something you need to defend, it is something you need to live. You begin to feel a steadiness that does not rise and fall with compliments or criticism, a calm that does not disappear when you are misunderstood, a sense of worth that does not vanish when you are overlooked. Because now, you are no longer asking the world to tell you who you are. You are standing before Allah and allowing Him to shape who you are becoming. And in that space, something settles inside you. A dignity that does not need to announce itself. A confidence that does not need to prove itself. A presence that does not need to be validated to be real. This is how Allah changes how you see yourself. Not by making you think more of yourself, but by making you think more deeply about who you are when only He is watching. Allah then teaches you how to carry weight in silence. After Allah changes how you see yourself, He teaches you how to hold what you are becoming without announcing it to the world. There was a time when you felt the need to share your struggles, your plans, your growth, your hopes. You wanted people to witness your journey, to understand what you were carrying, to recognize how far you had come. And there is nothing wrong with being seen, but Allah begins to show you something deeper. Not everything that is precious is meant to be displayed. Not everything that is growing is meant to be touched. Not everything that is forming is meant to be exposed. You start to feel a quiet instinct to protect what is happening inside you. You speak less about your dreams, not because they are small, but because they are still tender. You share less about your struggles, not because you are ashamed, but because you have learned that not every ear is a safe place for your heart. This is not secrecy from fear. This is privacy from wisdom. Allah teaches you that there is a difference between being open and being unguarded, between being honest and being vulnerable in places that cannot hold your vulnerability with care. You begin to notice how easily people can misunderstand what they do not carry, how quickly advice is given for a burden they have never felt, how casually judgments are formed about paths they have never walked. So you start carrying more quietly. You learn how to take your questions to prayer instead of to every conversation, how to take your disappointments to sujood instead of to every listener, how to take your plans to dua instead of to every opinion. And something shifts. Your relationship with Allah becomes more intimate, more personal, more real. It is no longer something you speak about often, it is something you live inside of. You realize that silence is not emptiness, it is space. Space where your intentions can grow without being shaped by other people's expectations. Space where your faith can deepen without being compared. Space where your character can be refined without being judged in its unfinished form. Allah teaches you the strength of unseen growth. You start to understand that roots grow in the dark, seeds break open underground, foundations are laid where no one is watching. If everything that mattered had to be visible, nothing would ever become strong. So you begin to value the parts of your life that no one claps for, the patience you show when no one knows you are waiting, the restraint you practice when no one sees the urge you are holding back, the kindness you offer when no one is there to praise you for it. These moments begin to feel heavy in a different way, not burdensome, sacred. You begin to feel like you are carrying something entrusted to you, not something owned by you. Your growth, your healing, your understanding, your direction all begin to feel like amana, something Allah has placed in your hands to protect, not to display. And this changes how you walk. You become less interested in being impressive and more interested in being sincere, less focused on being visible and more focused on being faithful, less drawn to being recognized and more drawn to being right with your Lord. People may not notice the shift. They may only see that you speak less, that you share less, that you move more quietly through life. But inside you know what is happening. You are becoming someone who can hold depth without needing an audience. Someone who can carry responsibility without needing praise. Someone who can grow without needing validation. And this is not a small thing. Because a person who can carry weight in silence is a person who can be trusted with something meaningful. Allah does not place heavy things in careless hands. So, if your life feels quieter, more private, more inward than it used to be, do not assume you are shrinking. You may be being trusted. Trusted to carry something that cannot be rushed into the light. Trusted to grow something that cannot survive in noise. Trusted to become something that must be strong before it is seen. This is the honor of silence. Not that you have nothing to say, but that what you are becoming is too valuable to be spoken about before it is ready to be lived. Allah finally teaches you who you are becoming. After Allah teaches you what to notice, what to tolerate, how to respond, where to belong, who to rely on, how to see yourself, and how to carry weight in silence, He brings you to a quiet meeting with your future self. Not in a vision, not in a promise written across the sky, but in a realization that settles slowly into your chest. You begin to notice that you are no longer the person who used to walk through life reaching outward for direction. You are becoming someone who moves from an inner center. Someone whose choices come from alignment instead of impulse. Someone whose steps feel guided, even when the path ahead is not fully visible. This is not confidence. This is clarity. There was a time when you measured your progress by milestones, achievements, recognition, movement that could be pointed to and explained. You wanted signs that you were becoming something, that your life was going somewhere, that your efforts were leading to a visible outcome. Now, the signs feel different. You notice how you react to things that once would have shaken you. You notice how you stay steady in moments that used to pull you apart. You notice how you can sit with uncertainty without feeling the need to escape it. And in these quiet changes, you begin to recognize the person you are becoming. Allah shows you that growth is not always forward. Sometimes it is deeper. You start to see that you are not being shaped for a role that can be described easily. You are being shaped for a way of being, a way of carrying yourself, a way of holding others, a way of standing in the world that reflects something beyond the world. You realize that your past struggles were not random. They trained your patience. Your disappointments were not wasted. They refined your expectations. Your seasons of loneliness were not empty. They taught you how to be present with yourself and with Allah. Everything begins to connect, not as a story of success, but as a story of preparation. You stop asking, When will my life finally begin? You start realizing it already has. Because who you are becoming is not waiting for a future moment to exist. That person is being formed in every choice you make right now, in every time you choose restraint over reaction, in every time you choose sincerity over appearance, in every time you choose trust over control. Allah teaches you that you are not being built for a stage. You are being built for responsibility. Not necessarily responsibility that comes with a title or a position, but responsibility that comes with being a presence in people's lives, someone whose words carry care, someone whose silence carries safety, someone whose actions carry consistency. You begin to feel the weight of this, not as pressure, but as purpose. You start to understand that becoming valuable is not about being rare. It is about being reliable, not about being admired, but about being anchored, not about being impressive, but about being steady in a world that often feels unstable. And this changes how you look at your future. You stop chasing a version of life that looks good from the outside. You start choosing a version of life that feels right on the inside. You stop asking what will make you stand out. You start asking what will make you stand firm. Allah introduces you to a sense of dignity that does not depend on circumstance, a sense of worth that does not rise and fall with success or failure, a sense of direction that does not collapse when plans change. You begin to walk through life with a quieter kind of confidence, not the kind that announces itself, the kind that endures. And in this endurance, you realize something simple and powerful. You were never being delayed. You were being deepened. You were never being overlooked. You were being protected. You were never being reduced. You were being refined. Allah was not preparing you for a moment. He was preparing you for a way of living, a way of carrying your faith through ease and hardship, a way of carrying your character through praise and criticism, a way of carrying your heart through connection and solitude. And when this realization settles inside you, it does not make you rush. It makes you walk carefully, because now you understand that your life is not something to be spent quickly, loudly, or carelessly. It is something to be carried. Carried with intention, carried with humility, carried with trust. And this is when you finally see what Allah has been doing all along. He has not been making you someone the world cannot ignore. He has been making you someone who cannot be moved, someone whose value does not depend on being noticed, someone whose worth is anchored in being aligned, someone who walks through the world quietly but leaves behind something that lasts. This is who you are becoming, not a person who is handled carefully because they demand it, but a person who is handled carefully because their presence teaches others, without words, that something sacred is being carried here. And now, let me leave you with this. If your life feels quieter than it used to, it is not because you are fading. It may be because you are being refined. If your circle feels smaller, it is not because you are being abandoned. It may be because what is meant to walk with you now must be able to walk with depth. If your heart feels heavier, it is not because you are breaking. It may be because you are being trusted with something stronger. You are not becoming difficult. You are becoming deliberate. You are not being pulled away from the world. You are being anchored more deeply in what matters. So walk gently with what Allah is shaping inside you. Protect it without fear. Carry it without pride. Trust it without rushing, because not everything that is valuable needs to be loud. Not everything that is strong needs to be seen. And not everything that is sacred needs to be touched by many hands. If you are still here, still listening, still breathing through this moment, let that be your reminder. Allah has not forgotten you. Allah is not finished with you. And what He is building in you is not meant to be handled casually. Let it grow. Let it settle. Let it become. And when you stand up from this moment and step back into your life, do it softly. Not because you are weak, but because you are carrying something that deserves to be treated with honor.